In Wolf Point, Montana, Greg Hurst's students engage in Native American storytelling. In response to Mourning Dove's collection of Salish coyote tales, the students create and present their own stories.
Into a story is always keep your bigger picture in mind of where you want the story to go. You're not going to answer every little detail, because if you start answering every little detail, you're going to say, then how are we going to do that, and how are we going to do that? Then suddenly you're trying to put together a 1,000-piece puzzle rather than a 10-piece.
So we don't have to answer that question then.
See if you can get by without it. Then when you get it together once, go back over it, and if you feel that you need to, then that's going to do it. The main thing is to get most of it down first and see what you add up to.
With the wings and talons of the dead eagle, we attack the bears.
Yeah, we're trying them out. We see the bears and we're hungry.
As you're going through this, and each person in the group is aware of what you're telling, also be thinking in terms, is one person going to tell it? Is each person going to tell a part of it? A good way of telling a story is start out a person you think will do a good job, but then have another person or two cut in. You know, anytime, like, what's going to happen is a person might leave a part out. You might say, oh, at this point, you need to add that, kind of like that. That's part of the oral tradition. Remember that you're going to tell it, not read it. Okay. What is the first thing you're going to say? I just want to see if you're on track. Without looking at that, you know the story. What is the first thing you're going to say? Just give me your first part. Tell me. Don't read to me. Tell me. How does it begin?
The grizzlies one day finally figured out that their food supply had ran out, and so they returned to the pond where they got the fish, and then the pond was dry.
See what we're doing? Is that how you're moving from writing it to actually telling it? So as you're getting it down, think in that terms. So try and get the basic story in your mind so you can tell it in a few minutes.
So then, should the wind say, fine, we'll have a race?
I'll have the eagle say, let's have a race.
Okay. You know, kind of be a little arrogant.
Yeah.
So you're summarizing, then you're going to introduce the eagle, the dialogue, okay? You have another member in your camp now. I did not assign one clan member to go over and join Coyote. He chose that on his own. In Coyote's world, as a Mourning Dove often deals with, in Coyote's world is that suddenly he is joined by someone. And why did you take him into your camp?
According to our story, our coyote was overthrown and he lost his powers. He dropped them. And so when the bears and the eagles and the salmon came together with the powers and decided to rule together. Fox, or who was at the time a bear, I guess, turned the groups against each other and stole the powers. Came to me with them, and so together we're ruling the world.
Your two faces can be shown.
Yeah.
Before that, it was one or the other.
Yeah.
And so now, the other people, the other tribes can actually see two characters at the same time, coyote and fox. Okay, I want you to come back a little bit more into your group where you can see other tribes. And this is our first preview. This is going to tell us if we need to go further and what we need to bring out. Now, while one group is presenting their legends so far, I need the other groups to listen and ask yourselves two things about that group. Do I understand it? And number two, even a bigger question, is it important that I hear it?
Okay, the title of our story is How the Grizzlies Trick the Eagles into Getting Food for Us, or salmon. One day we, the Grizzly Clan, figured out that our food supply had run out, so we returned to the pond where we got the salmon, and it was dried up. So then we started a journey towards the sea, and then we ran into the eagles, or the eagle chief, and we made a compromise. We said we will find her a mate if her and her eagle clan find us 150 fish but keep some alive so we can torture them. So they went and did it with ease, and they came back. And when they came back and landed, we killed all the eagles and ate the eagles and all the salmon. And the moral is that the smartest isn't always on top.
Okay, I'm going to go around to each group now, and I'm going to ask you to give a comment on that story. So you're going to have a moment to give a comment. I'm going to go around group by group. Before I do that, you're in a tribal society. It's very appropriate in a tribal society when you're telling a story to stop, look around at other people who are throwing you off and say, you need to listen. This is my moment talking. You're going to get your moment next. We're in tribal society. We can do this. Now, I'm going to come around to each group, and you're going to have your moment to give an opinion that will help this story become better.
The whole, thing about being smarter than you really appear. I think that's a good moral.
Yeah, their morals was pretty good.
Yeah.
And aside from the torture part, the whole story seemed to...
It'd be freaky if you see fishes with wings.
No, you're not debating each other. Remember, it's fine to have two views. That gives them two things to consider.
It was a good story, but the end part I didn't really get, because, see, you got the fish, but why would you kill the eagles? Because once you eat all the fish, then your food supply is gone.
Now, bears, I need your attention. I want to tell you something to consider when you go back there. I want to tell you, first of all, what I thought was strong and good about your story. You centered on one character in particular. That was detail. The other thing you mentioned, you introduced this idea of getting a mate and how that would play in. But I thought your story would be longer because it had other elements. So consider some of the things you've heard today from the other camps. When you go back to your story, think about those and then maybe expand on them a little bit. All right, Eagles, it's your moment.
One day, Eagle was walking along in a slow, clumsy way, and the wind was blowing strong and fast that day. Eagle gets mad at the wind and stops and yells at him.
Students are empowered by this activity of sharing and responding to each other's stories.
So then they have a race.
When students participate in this public forum, they see themselves as writers and storytellers and value the story development process.
Now I'm going to ask you for your first response. Again, try to come up with something that will help make this a better story the second time around.
Theirs was more read than told.
Good comment there. They want the second time around, they want it told and not read because it's called storytelling, not story reading.
How can you race the wind when you don't have wings in the first place? An eagle without wings?
I don't know, the whole thing on reality, I think it's alright because even in native storytelling right now, they talk about animals talking to each other and people talking to animals and they understand each other, so why can't an eagle talk to the wind or, it's still all in the same, same area.
There isn't really a problem talking to the wind, is there?
No.
There is no problem with that. But I think what would help that, I think you need to expand it, make it more of a story. You're not focusing on, you're just saying the eagles. Pretty general. Center on one of the eagles. Single them out, that sort of thing. I think that's a general consensus here is we need to make these a little longer, bring them a little more alive. All right, we're going to move back to our last group, the coyotes. We need to hear yours.
This is how the coyote was overthrown and then came back into power with help from the fox.
Through storytelling, Greg is encouraging students to apply all of the language arts. They are readers and writers. They are speakers and listeners. They are performers and audience. Through the storytelling experience, students are responding deeply, authentically, critically, and creatively to literature.
So he goes back, he steals the power from the people.
And by pitching them against each other.
He used the power of persuasion to put them against each other. How the bears like to eat the salmon. Salmon don't really like the eagles, I guess.
And so they just put them all against each other, and then while they are fighting, he stole the power. And then brought him back to Coyote.
You've heard this first draft of this story. tell them something that will make it better.
There is no moral.
Oh, there's the moral.
What is it?
What?
You're supposed to keep up with teamwork. That's the moral of the story.
Their story's pretty good, yeah.
It wasn't biased in any way, actually, so.
I think there's a lot of open-ended parts in there that didn't all quite fit together right. And it was kind of hard to follow along with what they were going for and how they were telling the story.
Did you understand that comment, Coyote? It's a very good point. And that's what I think plays into one of the strengths of your story, is when you give a longer story, and I think it's good to give a longer one, but the danger then is, do you explain each part equally so, as she says, it doesn't sound open-ended? Because your reader wants it all to tie it together. Now, I'm going to ask you to think about one last thing as you go into your last round today. How can I tell it better? Because the burden's on you to tell it better. And secondly, this is very hard to do, by the way, and I hope you appreciate that. What's the hardest part about it? Listening to other people's. So to get their attention, you have two things to do. Ask yourself, how can I tell it better? And please do this as a sign of respect for yourself and for your fellow Klansmen. Tell it better, and then demand a little bit from your listener. All of you in here are trying something that's difficult, and those of you, each group has a chief. If you have some of your councilmen sitting next to you who like to do other things, like not listen, your task is to say, you know, let's do a good job, let's help our group out, and let's help the others out. Storytelling involves two parts, storyteller and listener. They're equal parts. So remember those big questions, how and why. How is it told? And that more important question, why is it important?
Should we make it more realistic? Yeah, I think we should, because that was our biggest problem between the groups. That's what they said.
Okay. Tell me some of the changes you worked on from what you heard the last time.
This time we're going to tell
A little bit more about the eagle.
Yeah, why we killed him.
Yeah.
Why do you need to do that?
Because it was kind of senseless when we started. Because we just automatically, it's like we killed him for no reason, but there was a reason.
Yeah.
We didn't want to pay up because we didn't have a mate actually for him. And if they would have figured that out, they would have killed us.
And do you see what you're doing with that? If you abbreviate it too much as a storyteller, it's just going to be as if they're isolated points. Very briefly, how did your story change from the first one?
From the first one, we got more dialogue and more confrontation. How the eagle raced the wind. One day, the eagle was walking along in his...
My students were able to deliver 4 stories.
Our story is called The Salmon's Revenge.
But we didn't finish today. I need them to claim this story, to write it in polished form, and to present it to our community here. Our elders, the students, need to stand up and tell them, this is my story and this is what I have to offer. One thing you've shown is in a very short time we can come up with an idea, we can carry it through, and in a short time put it together as a story. Thank you very much. Teachers out there who do not know a lot about tribal culture know one thing, that they're teaching in America, and this is our story, this is our literature, and this is important. If you are going to understand yourself as Americans today, you need to deal with our core at the beginning. Otherwise, you're going to see us as a foreign culture. So if you learn our stories, you then will get much closer to, I believe, your own identity and how we very much are part of that.